You're living with two faces. Jung's deepest warning: there's a truth so unsettling, so quietly explosive, that most people will live their entire lives without confronting it. Carl Jung, one of the greatest minds in psychology and philosophy, discovered it not in a textbook but in the human soul. He called it the persona, the mask we wear to function in society. And behind that mask, something deeper, something darker, an entire side of us we've disowned, buried, or denied. Jung called this hidden self the shadow, and his deepest warning was this: if you don't face your shadow, it will control your life from the dark, without you even knowing. We're all living with two faces, one that we show the world polished, acceptable, approved, and another that lurks beneath raw, emotional, rejected. The strange part is that we didn't build these two faces consciously. It happened slowly, invisibly. As children, we learned what parts of us were lovable and what parts weren't. Maybe we were praised for being quiet, so we silenced our anger. Maybe we were rewarded for being helpful, so we buried our selfishness. Maybe we were punished for crying, so we hid our vulnerability. And piece by piece, we constructed our persona, the version of ourselves that could survive the world. But what happened to the other parts? They didn't disappear. They just moved underground.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
That's the shadow, everything we refuse to see in ourselves. Every impulse we deny, every desire we judge, every fear we suppress. It doesn't matter if you pretend those things aren't there. They are, and the more you repress them, the more power they gain. Jung compared the shadow to a wild animal caged in the basement. The longer it's ignored, the more feral it becomes, and eventually it will break through. But maybe not in the way you expect, not in a dramatic outburst or a violent rage. Sometimes it leaks out in subtle sabotage, a failed relationship you can't explain, a decision you regret but repeat, a resentment that simmers for years. The shadow doesn't just live in murderers and monsters. It lives in all of us. And the scariest part, it often wears your own face. So, if we're all wearing masks, who are we really? That's the terrifying beauty of Jung's insight. The persona isn't fake, but it's incomplete. It's the version of you that's adapted, not authentic. And the longer you identify only with your mask, the more alienated you become from your full self. You begin to feel hollow, disconnected, like something essential is missing. That's because part of you is missing from your conscious awareness. And the only way to reclaim it is to go into the shadow. But this is where most people stop. Because going into the shadow means confronting everything you've worked so hard to avoid. Your jealousy, your aggression, your envy, your shame, and not just seeing it in others, seeing it in yourself. Jung said, knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people. In other words, if you don't integrate your shadow, it will keep showing up in the people you hate, the situations you fear, the patterns you can't break. You'll keep thinking the world is against you when really, it's just mirroring back the parts of yourself you've refused to claim. This isn't just philosophy, it's practical. Think about your life right now. Where do you overreact emotionally? Where are you judgmental, not just of others, but of yourself? Where do you feel most stuck? Chances are, your shadow is involved. You might think you're avoiding conflict, because you're a peaceful person, but maybe you've just repressed your assertiveness. You might think you're devoted to helping others, but maybe you're avoiding your own needs. You might think you're nice, but maybe you're just afraid of rejection. The shadow hides behind virtues, not just vices. That's why it's so hard to see and so easy to justify. Now ask yourself this: what parts of yourself have you exiled to survive? What emotions do you never allow yourself to feel? What roles have you accepted without ever questioning them? And perhaps most importantly, who are you when no one is watching? These are not just reflective questions. They're doorways. Doorways into the parts of your psyche that hold the keys to your wholeness. Jung didn't believe in destroying the shadow. He believed in integrating it. That means bringing it into the light, not to act it out, but to understand it, to dialogue with it, to ask, why are you here? What do you want to tell me? Because beneath every shadow is a gift. Your repressed anger might be the energy you need to set boundaries. Your shame might be guarding your deepest vulnerability. Your envy might point to a dream you've denied. The shadow isn't evil, it's unloved. And when you can love the parts of yourself you've hated, something extraordinary happens. You become whole. Not perfect, not pure, whole. And wholeness is power. Because it means you're no longer at war with yourself. But this journey is not easy. It requires radical honesty, but brutal self-awareness, and the courage to look in the mirror and say, I am both light and dark. I am both good and bad. I am both sacred and savage. When you accept that, no one can control you with guilt. No one can shame you with your past. No one can manipulate you with fear. You've already met your demons, and you've made peace with them. So I ask you now, what face are you wearing right now? And what face are you hiding? Because until you bring them both into the light, you'll always be split, always be restless, always be half awake. Jung's deepest warning wasn't about evil. It was about ignorance. The ignorance of believing you are only your persona. The ignorance of thinking your shadow isn't there. And the ignorance of assuming that peace means avoiding conflict, when in reality, peace only comes when you've faced every part of yourself and refused to flinch. The mirror of others. Why you hate what you haven't accepted in yourself, one of the most uncomfortable truths Carl Jung ever revealed, is also one of the most liberating. Other people are mirrors. What we hate in them is often what we refuse to see in ourselves. What we envy, what we judge, what we mock, these are not random reactions. They are clues. They point back to something hidden in us, something unresolved. And the deeper we deny the truth, the more powerful our projections become. This is why certain people seem to trigger us instantly. They walk into a room, say just a few words, and we're already irritated. It feels irrational, but it's not. It's the shadow yours screaming through the mask of someone else. We don't see people as they are. We see people as we are. That's a hard pill to swallow because it shifts responsibility back onto us. It means the anger you feel toward that arrogant coworker might actually be your own unacknowledged desire for confidence. It means your disgust toward someone's selfishness might hide a longing to finally put yourself first. But it means that what you call righteous judgment might be nothing more than shadow projection, your psyche disowning a trait in you and throwing it onto someone else so you don't have to deal with the shame. Jung called this process projection, and it's one of the most common psychological defense mechanisms. But when we can't accept something in ourselves, we unconsciously project it onto others. This creates a kind of emotional sleight of hand. We stay good in our own eyes by making someone else bad. But the cost is enormous. Projection keeps us blind. It keeps us reactive, and most dangerously, it keeps us disconnected from the truth of who we are. This is why relationships can be so volatile. Romantic partners, close friends, even strangers, they all become screens onto which our unfinished business gets projected. You're not fighting with your partner because they're insensitive, you're fighting with the part of yourself that's been silenced for too long. You're not angry at your friend because they're too controlling, you're angry because you gave away your power and now you resent watching someone else use theirs. The conflict is real, but the roots are internal. And until we trace the emotional thread back to its origin, which is almost always inside us, we'll keep repeating the same patterns with different people. So how do we break the cycle? The first step is awareness. Every time you feel a strong emotional reaction, especially hatred, judgment, or resentment, pause. Instead of lashing out or shutting down, ask, what is this person reflecting back to me? What part of myself does this trigger touch? What have I been unwilling to acknowledge? This isn't about excusing toxic behavior. It's about claiming your emotional responses as your own. It's about recognizing that your reaction is your responsibility, even when someone else starts it. There's a moment of enormous power when you realize, I'm not just reacting to them, I'm reacting to myself through them. That's when the projection dissolves. That's when the shadow starts to become conscious. And that's when you begin to reclaim the parts of you that were lost in judgment. But this work is not easy. It demands brutal honesty and a level of self-inquiry that can feel psychologically invasive. It means having the courage to admit, I am not as innocent as I thought. I am not as pure as I pretend. I, too, am capable of the very things I condemn. That admission shatters your self-image, but it also sets you free. Because once you stop needing to see yourself as flawless, you can finally become real. And realness is where growth lives. When you meet your shadow in others, you stop running from it. Their arrogance becomes your lesson in confidence. Then their selfishness becomes your reminder to set boundaries. Then their darkness becomes your opportunity to bring light to your own. Every interaction becomes a mirror, every conflict a teacher, every judgment a doorway into deeper self-knowledge. But here's the catch. Most people never do this work. They stay trapped in projection their entire lives, walking through the world in a hall of mirrors, blaming everyone else for the reflections they don't want to see. They gossip, criticize, cancel, and distance, thinking they're protecting themselves, when really they're avoiding themselves. They think they're fighting evil out there, but the real war is internal. It always was. So I ask you, who do you hate right now? Who irritates you the most? Who do you judge harshly? Don't dismiss those feelings, interrogate them. What are they revealing about your own shadow? What part of you wants to be seen, but is too ashamed to step into the light? If you can answer that honestly, without flinching, you've already begun the descent into real self-awareness. And that descent is sacred, because it's the only path to true integration. Jung didn't say this would be easy. He said it would be necessary, because until you confront what you've projected onto others, you'll never be free. You'll always be reacting, blaming, avoiding. But when you do confront it, when you reclaim your projections and integrate your shadow, you become something rare, a human being who sees clearly. A human being who owns their darkness. A human being who can love the world because they've made peace with themselves. The inner alchemy, pay, mir, turning your darkness into strength and wholeness. Once you've recognized the truth that the shadow is not your enemy, but your unclaimed self, you begin to understand the real purpose of this inner work. It's not just about healing. It's not even just about becoming more self-aware. It's about transformation. Jung often spoke of the process of individuation, the psychological journey through which a person becomes a unified, whole being. And central to this journey is the integration of the shadow. But integration does not mean domination. It does not mean controlling or suppressing your darker impulses. But it means listening, learning, and alchemizing. It means turning what was once hidden into something conscious, powerful, and deeply human. This is the inner alchemy that Jung was pointing toward, the transmutation of your darkness into strength, into clarity, into wisdom. We often think of growth as becoming better, more polished, more moral, more acceptable. But Jung challenges that illusion. He's not interested in perfection. He's interested in wholeness. That means embracing the mess, embracing the contradictions, embracing the parts of you that don't fit the image you've built. Think about it. What if the very thing you've been trying to get rid of is the source of your power? Your rage, your jealousy, your fear, what if they're not flaws, but signals? What if they're trying to show you where your energy is trapped, where your soul is still asleep? To do this inner work, you must become something like a spiritual scientist. You observe your patterns, your reactions, your emotional eruptions, not with judgment, but with curiosity. When rage appears, you don't suppress it, you ask it, what are you protecting? What boundary was crossed? What pain have I ignored? And when shame rises, you don't drown in it, you lean closer. What part of me have I abandoned? What standard am I holding myself to that isn't even mine? These are not easy conversations, but they are the ones that matter most. Because the more you understand your darkness, the less it controls you. And something incredible begins to happen. You find strength where there used to be fear. You find clarity where there used to be confusion. You find peace where there used to be war. But you can't skip this step. You can't bypass the shadow with positive thinking or spiritual optimism. That's just another mask, another persona. Real transformation requires descent. You have to go into the underworld of your own psyche, not to stay there, but to retrieve what you left behind. Maybe it's your voice. Maybe it's your courage. Maybe it's your capacity for joy that got buried beneath years of seriousness and survival. The shadow holds all of it, and when you bring it into the light, not only do you reclaim it, you refine it. That's alchemy. This is what Jung meant when he said that the shadow must be assimilated into the personality. Not rejected, not exiled, assimilated, brought into the fold. And when that happens, you become something rare. You become someone who can stand in your truth without needing to be a saint. Someone who can lead without needing to be perfect. Someone who can love without losing themselves. That's not weakness, that's mastery. So pause here and ask yourself, what have I been afraid to look at in myself? What part of me have I labeled bad and pushed away? What would happen if I stopped fighting it and started listening to it. Not because you want to act on every dark impulse, but because you want to understand where it comes from. Because only through understanding can you transform. Only through compassion can you reclaim. And only through wholeness can you finally feel at peace in your own skin. We spend so much of our lives trying to be good, but what if the real goal is to be whole? What if your power isn't in how flawlessly you perform, but in how deeply you integrate? What if you don't need to be more positive, more spiritual, more enlightened, but just more you? Fully, fiercely, honestly, this is the work. And it's the most important work you'll ever do. Because until you do it, you're not truly living, you're performing. But once you do it, you stop pretending and start becoming. You become the kind of person who doesn't fear their own depths, who doesn't flinch at their own complexity, who doesn't need approval to feel real. You become the kind of person who walks through the world not with a mask but with a mirror, holding it up to others, gently, powerfully, reminding them you too are allowed to be whole. Beyond the mask, how embracing the shadow awakens your true destiny. There's a moment in every life, sometimes quiet, sometimes catastrophic, where the mask begins to slip. Maybe it's a breakdown. Maybe it's heartbreak. Maybe it's success that brings no joy, or failure that strips away every illusion. In that moment, you come face to face with a question you can't ignore. Who am I really when I'm not performing? And if you're brave enough to sit with that question, not run from it, not numb it, you begin to feel something stir beneath the surface. It's not just your shadow, it's your true self, long buried beneath layers of expectation, shame, and persona. And that self is not here to play a role. It's here to live a destiny. Carl Jung believed that each of us carries within a blueprint, not a rigid script, but a potential. He called it the self, the totality of who we are meant to become. Not just the polished parts, not just the acceptable ones, all of it. The self is not perfection, it's integration, and the journey toward it always begins with the shadow. Why? Because the shadow holds the keys to your unlived life. It contains the energy you need to grow, the instincts you've abandoned, the truth you've been too afraid to speak. And until you reclaim it, you're only living a fraction of what's possible.